it's Dee from Gastrofork. I'm joined today with my sister and editor of Gastrofork, Nathalie. Today we're going to be talking about Gastrofork's 10-year anniversary. A lot has happened in the last decade, and so we're just kind of we're going to try and dissect it and have a little fun while we're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like, on my end, I've just loved going to the events in the last year, kind of being like the resident photographer and also eater, because, you know, that's hand in hand. If I get invited to go to do a restaurant review or event, not only will I be taking pictures, I will be eating, which has been a fantastic 10 years. But the thing is, I joined my sister a little bit later in her journey because I was going through school. I was pretty busy. I think the first article I ever wrote for you is like where to get food for $5 because I was like a broke student at the time. So what I'm really curious about is like, can you tell me how you started Gastrofork and like what inspired you to put this like blog together?
For sure. So when I first started Gastrofork, a lot of my friends and I wouldn't say that I'm the best cook, or I guess I'm kind of lazy. I love eating out at restaurants and supporting local businesses. So that was kind of my go-to. And my friends always asked me where to go and recommend like the newest places that opened up. And I was like, you know what? It'd be great to just have something central where they can check it and they can see what I've been up to, because it was kind of this ongoing conversation. It was the same conversation. And then it started off with that. Then I was also interested in learning how to cook Filipino food, and that's where our dad rather, ties in. He wanted to show me how to cook Filipino food, and then I wanted to write it down. So I'm like, you know what, why don't we make a cookbook, put it up on the website, and see what happens? And that's kind of the foundling of how Gastrofork started.
And like, you know, it's really interesting because you started this like by yourself, kind of like just kind of poking around on the internet, you know, like, and another thing that fascinates me too is at the time that you started, I mean, there was a handful of people doing it, but it was still an emergent thing. Like everyone kind of food blogs now, like it's easy for me to take a picture of food. But back then it was like different because, you know, like it was a blog format. You did write like a whole post behind it. And I find that that's kind of going away because, well, there's still long posts on Instagram, but I find that for the most part, people look at it and then scroll on by, like they're like, oh yeah, delicious. So I'm just curious about like what that looked like in the beginning when you started.
When I first started, there were like a handful of foodies. I remember I followed Diana from Foodology.ca, Me June. She's followed me foodie back then. And Joyce from Band Foodies. They were kind of my inspiration in starting everything. And yes, I think primarily at that time it was basically blogs. Just because I think like 10 years ago, I don't even know how old Instagram is or social media, but I feel like 10 years ago, it was just starting to emerge where people were sharing their food and sharing, you know, the reviews just on those platforms. It was more, I guess the traditional blog was more mainstream back then.
Yeah. What were some of the first foodies that you noticed on the scene? Like, we'll get into it, like who we met, because I'm really excited to talk about the community aspect of your work. But I'm like, who do you remember being like the other like pioneers of the scene, at least in Vancouver?
Yeah, definitely. I would say Diana, Mijun, and Joyce. I also followed a lot of magazines here that I really enjoyed. Edible was one of them. I'm trying to remember what the other one was. I want to say it's Vancouver Magazine, but I'm not 100% sure. But there was one writer, Tara Lee. She still writes, and I really enjoyed her writing as well. I just found it really interesting that, you know, people were talking about food in ways that were almost romantic in a way, and I liked that. And then I also liked, for example, Diana's style of writing because she was very straightforward and, you know, like she gave her opinion without being too destructive, I guess. And she was the kind of foodie that everyone would relate to because, you know, she could eat high end, but she could also eat McDonald's. And like,
yes.
I found that Mijun was also another person that I followed a lot because reading her writing was very not only entertaining but also very educational, just because she knew a lot about food, and she was the opposite of Diana in a sense where she wasn't afraid to talk about things and, the negative experience she might have had. And it was never always just negative. She had a lot of constructive feedback, which I tried to also infuse into my writing as well, because I felt, especially with local businesses, we're here to support them.
In terms of like food writing and the restaurant scene, how does it differ now from when you first started writing? I mean, we can kind of see this in two prongs, like the style of writing and how you present food blogging in general. And then, do you find that the restaurant scene has like expanded in a certain way in Vancouver or shifted? Like, I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Definitely. I feel like when I first started, and even like way before I even started, food reviews were done mostly by, I guess, quote unquote experts who, were part of like a magazine or like a newspaper, and their word was kind of golden. But because of social media and because of blogging, like the everyday person can go out and kind of share their experience. And, when you think about like a food critic, I don't know, I think of the one from Nathalie, who's like a total snob. So I think that's why people enjoy reading blogs and enjoy following people on Instagram, because they can relate to them. And I feel that throughout the years, it's gotten a lot better, because when I first started, it was still kind of this thing where, we would be invited to restaurants and try their food, but they were kind of, apprehensive about us and like what kind of stuff we're going to write. I noticed they were very selective of who they were inviting, because I noticed they would invite the foodies who don't really write anything negative. And if you did write something negative, then you were blacklisted. Like, I would not see that. And yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot now because, for example, Instagram, right? Like, it's so easy to share, snap a pic and share your food. And you don't have to be a food critic. You don't have to, you don't have to be necessarily an amazing photographer. You just have to have a voice and a platform. And although it feels like the market has been kind of saturated, it's always interesting to see other people come up and see their style, because there are a lot of really great people who come in the last 10 years, and they've changed the game a lot too.
Yeah, definitely. We need to talk about the cookbook. I joined Gastrofork a little bit later. When I joined, you and Pa were already in progress of like kind of throwing this cookbook together. I'll give some context for the audience too. So my dad and my sister, they put together this cookbook called Filipino Cooking Made Easy. And growing up, my dad just made the most delicious home-cooked Filipino food ever. And I am just learning how to cook them all. And I go through this recipe book. And the one thing that's fantastic about this book is it's really easy to, like, it's very accessible. You can do most of the recipes within 30 minutes, I would say. A lot of them, the title lives up, like the book lives up to its name, that it is made easy. Plus, it's supplemented by a YouTube series called Cook Show with Joe that's on Gastrofork's channel, which I think probably got the amount of views that it got because right when you were posting these in the beginning, it was like one of the few Filipino recipes that were in video format that was in English. So a lot of people did actually go and watch Pa cook. And you know what? Honestly, recipe posts always do well on like food blog sites because it's the thing you Google and you bookmark and you keep going back to unless you have a physical book. So I think that also led to the interest behind this. I came later to the Gastrofork kind of like inception. So I'm actually really curious. Can you tell me what inspired you to start this creative project with Pa, and like what led you to crafting that book and the YouTube cooking show?
For sure. So, well, like you, I wanted to kind of go back to our roots and be, like I wanted to learn the way that Pa cooks Filipino food, because if you go to different Filipino restaurants, you'll find that there's so many slight variations to the same recipe. And I feel like it's very similar to, like, say, Chinese food, where it depends on the region you're from. And it was important to me to kind of absorb the knowledge that Pa had so that I could, pass it along to, at the time, whether I would have kids or not. And just kind of have that, because I also wanted something that Pa could leave behind as a legacy, because, he's a really amazing cook. Like, everyone who's had his food always raves about it. And I remember there was a lot of fond memories. And actually, just recently, I was speaking to my friends Nicole and Lucy, who I've known since high school, and they were saying one of their fondest memories was coming over and having Pa cook for them, and it was Filipino food. So it was important to me to preserve that, and it was just a natural progression where, Pa was writing down all the recipes, and of course, because he is like a good cook, he doesn't measure things. So it forced him to focus and figure out what the exact measurements were. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't we just put this together in a cookbook and see what will happen? Like, give it to friends, and then maybe like sell it if if I can make it work, because I'm not a graphic designer. And then it was also kind of just this also natural thing that we wanted to preserve it also with video. I was really interested with YouTube at the time, and I was fascinated with different categories and not specifically food. And I didn't really see a lot of Filipino food, like you said, in English. And so I thought that it'd be interesting to kind of put together something that people could find accessible. And so we started doing that. And thank goodness that you hopped on, because you actually know what you're doing.
It is a beautiful way to leave his legacy and mark, because cooking is one of those things that are very commonly passed down. And while you and I will carry the memory of his kitchen with us and cook for our families as we are now, it's just so fantastic that more people can access it as well. Like, whenever I meet someone new, they're always like, oh, I really want to learn how to cook Filipino food, but I don't know where to start. And I give them this book, and it's easy. So it kind of did miss. I mean, most cuisines are easy to learn when you do it, but I guess especially if someone's not from that culture, it seems a little daunting for whatever reason. So it's always encouraging to me to hear the people I give the book to being like, oh, it was really, really super easy to do this. And it's just fantastic to hear that the format that you and Pod did works in that way. It's not too hard to follow. Like, basically people can make a really delicious meal in 30 minutes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The point of having the cookbooks, of course, other than the legacy, is we both wanted to invite people to our table, right? Like, we, pre-COVID, we had people come over and Pa would cook and everything. But I think the goal was sharing that and having people enjoy Pa's cooking, even if they couldn't come to visit him.
Yeah, for sure. So I know we're coming to time, so I just wanted to ask you, what's next for Gastrofork? Especially, you've shifted too yourself. You're now mom. Winston's so cute. I can't wait to see him once we're all immunized and things like that. I don't know what you're obviously it's hard to ask this question because, pandemic, but I don't know what's on the horizon for Gastrofork.
Honestly, with Gastrofork, and it's always been the same from day one, I've never wanted to do it for money, and I didn't want to do it for fame or, those silly things. I think the most important thing was wherever my journey was going, I would take Gastrofork with me. And obviously, Gastrofork has become is basically me, our journey. It's fused. Now it's not a side thing that, if I'm going on vacation, I'm going to blog about things. It's ingrained in our lives, yours, mine, Pa's, everyone's. So I don't have a strategic plan for Gastrofork. I feel the natural progression of it would probably be, right now it's focused on recipes, and I'm probably going to start writing a little bit more about recipes for kids, that kind of stuff, things that are kind of a daily thing that happens in my life, which has always been mostly what Gastrofork's been about, where it's not I plan to go to things or whatnot. It's just more, I guess, organic would be the right word. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm really enjoying the fact that now that we're kind of stuck at home, we're going to learn more recipes. And then when we do open up again, I would love to support local businesses. I mean, we were trying to do that last year. We made those lists for wineries and the beer companies as well, just to try and support our community, because in any way possible, it's important for us to help each other and lift each other up, especially during COVID, because so many restaurants and so many businesses are closing or struggling. So it's important to me to be able to do that and continue doing that in the future.
I think when we are able, like when the restrictions lift, the number one thing people are going to do, besides travel, is they're probably going to go out to eat. Like the restaurant industry is just going to get so much hometown love, because I feel like everyone, obviously, like another thing is going home and seeing your family and having a big dinner, but I'm like, everyone, I think, will go to the restaurant first, because, like, let's be real, we've been cooking a lot. So, like, we're all going to go have the food made for us by people who are just, like, fantastic on the scene here, and we're going to have, like, we're just going to have a collective, like, woo-ha once everything is safe and we're good to go.
Have to commend the people who are doing it right now, making it work, because they've had to like sidestep and try to figure out the best way to keep their businesses afloat. And just seeing them, the measure of their mettle is just, it's inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I mean, we have so much to talk about. We're doing kind of like a mini cast for Gastro's 10-year anniversary, so there's going to be more of this. And I mentioned earlier that we're also doing like a cookbook revamp, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone who's followed us on this journey. Like, especially the ones from day one. There's a lot of people that I still talk to who have been so supportive since I started. So they're way back when, I think it was probably, the first couple months I started Gastro, there was a fundraising event called Bake for the Quake. It was for Indonesia, because they were going through a really tough time after an earthquake that hit there. And that's where I kind of met a lot of people who read the blog, and also other food bloggers. And it was so endearing and also interesting to see people who actually come and read Gastrofork, because, to be quite honest, I always thought that I was the only person who was reading it just for spelling errors. So to put a name to a face and also just that kind of stuff, I was really happy to meet them all. So I'm really grateful, and I'm really thankful for all of those people and those opportunities. And yeah, I mean, if you guys aren't already, I would recommend following us. Obviously, the blog is Gastrofork.ca. Our Instagram handles, I think Nat will probably put down there, but mine is Deedles, DEEDLS. And then obviously the Gastrofork one is Gastrofork on Instagram, and you'll find us on Twitter and on Facebook, but mostly Instagram. And I'll get Nat to share hers too, because she does share a lot of delicious food on hers. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Nat.
So yeah, thank you so much for listening to our podcast today. Again, just to repeat what my sister said, you can find Gastrofork on Gastrofork.ca, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Gastrofork. My sister's account, which is really quite active, is DEEDLS on Instagram. You can see her journeys as a mom, and you can see cute little Winston on there sometimes, and she blogs about food all the time. You can find me at Nada Di Coco Photography. And you can find me, like, basically, that is the same for everywhere. Like, Twitter is _ Nada Di Coco. Facebook is Nada Di Coco Photo, because I run my own wedding videography business called Nada Di Coco Photography. You can also follow me at Filipinix Pages, which is a bookstagram that recommends books by Filipino, Filipina, and Filipinx authors. I started in the pandemic, and it's just been a lifelong journey to reconnect with my roots, and I just love the community that's on there. So if you are looking for more Filipino content, including like Filipino cookbooks, give that one a visit as well. And again, like, we'll thank everybody, and we'll put links in the show notes and all that stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us.
Leave us a comment if you want to hear more from us, because this is a community thing, and we want as much community participation as possible. But yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. See you next time.
Bye-bye.